Hello, let's get going. We are doing chapters for Go for No by Richard Fenton and Andrea Waltz. Chapter 20. When you're hot, you're hot. That's another benefit to setting no goals. You get built-in protection from prematurely ending a hot streak, he continued. When salespeople hit a streak of yeses, the worst thing they can do is back off and slack off. But that's exactly what they usually do. But when you're going for no, and you hit a hot streak of yeses, you actually step up your sales attempts in an attempt to hit your no goal. Would a manager of a baseball team keep his star player out of the game because he was on a hot streak? No, I replied. So then why would a salesperson sit himself or herself down when they're hot? It doesn't make any sense. You never want to lose your success momentum. When you were 3 for 3, Eric, what did you do? I took myself out of the game. Precisely. However, if you were going for no, you would have been behind your goal and would have kept yourself in the game. We'll never know what kind of week you might have had. Hey, don't rub it in, he said in mock anger. I want to rub it in. Rub it in till it hurts. If it stings badly enough, maybe you'll change your behavior. Don't worry. It stings plenty, I assured my twin. Chapter 21. Next. You've probably heard this before, but it's one of the best examples of the relationship between failure and success that I know of. Abraham Lincoln had less than 1 year of formal schooling, failed in business twice, and lost 8 of 10 elections he was in before winning the presidency in 1860. But is he remembered for his failures? No. He's remembered for saving the Union, abolishing slavery, and being a man of great integrity and courage. Where would this nation be if Lincoln had a below-average failure quotient? Failure quotient? I repeated. Yes, each of us has our own personal failure quotient. In other words, how many times is a person willing to fail before succeeding? How many times are they willing to get knocked down and then get back up, knowing that they are almost certain to get knocked down again? How much failure can they endure on the road to success? Perhaps the single most important factor that determines if a person will achieve everything they want in life, or simply settle for crumbs, is their failure quotient. Fortunately, for the United States of America, Abraham Lincoln had a very high failure quotient. I guess mine is fairly low. If I get 3 or 4 no's in a row, I stop for a donut. I chuckled. Did you know that R.H. Macy failed 7 times to get his department store chain off the ground before he finally succeeded? Do you know the type of rejection Harlan Sanders withstood when he started Kentucky Fried Chicken? Here's a guy who turns 65 and gets his first retirement check only to discover it's not enough to live on. So he goes on the road and spends the next 2 years trying to sell owners of fast food restaurants on the idea of using his chicken recipe. And in that 2-year time, how many restaurants do you think he signed up? I don't know. 0. Not a 1. Any normal person would have quit. But the Colonel wasn't normal. He was extraordinary. He keeps going. He gets better at his presentations, and finally he gets one acceptance, and then another, and another, then another. I guarantee you the taste of success he enjoyed at that point wasn't sweet. It was finger-licking good. We can never let the word no devastate us. Think for a moment what it might be like, or what it must be like to be a doctor. Every doctor knows that eventually, someday, they are going to lose a patient. Now, what if every doctor, when they finally did lose a patient, said, "That's it, I'm done, I've failed, I'm through with medicine"? What would happen? Well, pretty soon we'd have no doctors left, I answered. That's right. That's why in medical school, every doctor is taught the magic word they need for when they lose a patient, so they can get past the pain and keep going. What's the word? I asked. Simple. The magic word is next. When a doctor loses a patient, they must be able to focus on their next patient. They must be able to move on. It's the only rational approach. But what do most of us do when we have a failure? We analyze it and languish over it and let ourselves be buried by it, when what we should be doing What we should do when something doesn't go our way is to simply say, next, and move on. You make it sound easy. It isn't easy, but like everything in life, it becomes easier with practice. I wish I knew where my reluctance to hear no came from. I've tried to pinpoint it, but I really don't know. It doesn't matter where it came from, he exclaimed. The underlying reasons that people become afraid of rejection are countless. The way they were raised, an early traumatic sales experience, who knows and who cares? All I know is that inspirational CDs cannot coax your fears away, threats won't scare them away, and ignoring your fear won't make it go away on its own. The only way to learn to numb yourself to know. You mean to ignore it? No, I mean just the opposite. Numbing yourself to know isn't about ignoring it. It's about experiencing it so often that it eventually loses its power over you. Do the thing you fear. And the fear will go away, I finished. Yes. Just remember, Eric, that Lincoln is remembered for his accomplishments, not his failures. Babe Ruth is remembered for his record 714 homers, not his 1,330 strikeouts, which was also a record. When everything in life is over and done with, no one will remember your failures, just your successes, and neither will you. And with that, my mirror image shifted his attention to the activity of flying the plane, and we began our gradual descent toward Monterey. Chapter 22. It was still pitch black when the phone rang. I rolled over and fumbled the receiver, pulling it to my ear. Yes, I managed. Good morning, a voice said cheerfully. This is your 5 o'clock wake-up call. Wake-up call? Oh, it took me several seconds to remember where I was, but then it all hit me. It was Saturday morning, and I was in a suite at the inn at Spanish Bay, set among groves of tall Monterey pines overlooking the Pacific Ocean, and I was about to play Pebble Beach. I scrambled out of bed, showered and dressed, then headed down to the lobby. It was amazing how much energy one could have when one was about to play golf. Eric strode in shortly after, and we made our way to the elegant restaurant and ordered breakfast. Sleep well? Eric asked, digging into his eggs Benedict. Yes, great, I responded. Good. I don't want there to be any excuses for why I kicked your behind on the course this morning. Oh, so that's how it's going to be, huh? Care to place a little wager, I responded. With what? You have no money, remember? He had me there. But we could play for something else, he said with an air of intrigue. Like what? Oh, let's say Low Man gets to sit in the audience this afternoon and High Man gives the presentation. I looked at him and realized that I couldn't tell if he was serious or not. I thought that you loved to speak to large groups. Where did you get that? On the jacket cover of your book, I responded. Well, don't believe everything you read, he said with a laugh. The truth is, I'm scared to death on stage. Every time I'm introduced, I ask myself why on earth I accepted the engagement. Sometimes I feel like my heart is going to literally pound right out of my chest. Why do it then? Remember, the comfort zone is never static. It's either expanding, or shrinking, I finished. Exactly. I know the day I start giving in to my fear in one area of my life, it will only be a matter of time before it becomes easier to avoid other challenges as well. We met Kurt and Cheryl at the first tee, where I was introduced as Edward, Eric's twin brother, as we had decided over dinner the night before. It's nice to meet you, Edward, Cheryl said, offering her hand. Edward is thinking of going into sales, Eric told the pair. I was hoping the two of you if you don't mind, if he picks your brain a little bit as you play. No problem, Kurt said, as he shook hands as well. We do nothing but talk shop anyways. I was given the honors of teeing off first and felt pretty good with my straight, if not overly long, drive. It soon became clear, however, that I wasn't going to be Low Man today, as Kurt, Eric, and Cheryl each outdrove me by 20 yards. Eric rode in the cart with Cheryl, and I with Kurt. So you're thinking about going into sales, huh? Kurt asked. Yep. Any tips on that you can share would be helpful. Well, what kind of things do you want to know? Well, what I really want is your take on my brother's concept. Have you had any takes? What I want is your take on the impact my brother's concept have had on you and if you'd recommend them. By concepts, I mean the idea of going for no rather than yes, increasing your failure quotient, that kind of stuff. Yeah, it does seem kind of weird at first, doesn't it? Yes, it does. I know it worked for him. I've seen his house. But does it work for the average person? Not for very long, Kurt said. Well, this wasn't the answer I expected. But soon Kurt's true meaning became clear. Because within a short period of time, anyone who adopts his strategies stops being average. He continued, when I first started working for your brother, I suffered from a bad case of Pike syndrome. Have you ever heard of Pike syndrome? I don't think so. A group of scientists at an aquarium in Canada did an experiment where they placed a large pike and some small minnows in a glass tank and separated them with a glass partition. The scientists watched as hungry pike repeatedly battered its nose against the invisible barrier for hours until the pike finally gave up. Then, the scientists removed the glass partition, and what do you think happened? Bye-bye minnows. Nope. The pike stayed on its side of the tank, swimming in circles with lunch just inches away, restrained only by the imagined barrier. The pike had conditioned itself through hours of nose bumping to stay within its own self-imposed limitations. Most people are no different from the pike, he continued. They have had bad experiences, banged their noses a few times, and learned how to quit. When they finally find themselves in a new situation where there really are no barriers, where they can eat all the minnows they want, but do they? No, they restrain themselves within their own imaginary walls. When I started to work for CopyQuest, that was me. But your brother changed the way I think, sell, and live. I owe him a deep debt of gratitude. Because he taught you how to succeed? No, because he taught me to enjoy bumping my nose. Chapter 23. You don't want to buy insurance, do you? The sun lifted higher in the sky, and the beauty of Pebble Beach on the Monterey Peninsula was almost overwhelming. After 9 holes, it was clear that the other me had no greater than a 6 handicap, while I would have struggled to stay in double digits. At the 10th hole, Eric suggested that we switch carts, so I could have an opportunity to spend some time learning from Cheryl as well. I assume you're into this concept of failing more too, I began. Absolutely. Studies show that as many as 80% of all salespeople don't make it through their first year for the simple reason that they failed to make enough calls. That's it. Nothing else. I always operated under the assumption that the key to success was skill and ability, I replied. Skill is highly overrated, Cheryl laughed. Don't get me wrong, Edward. When I first started in sales, I attended a lot of training programs to polish my skills. The problem was that I didn't spend enough time applying them. While I was busy getting smarter, many people with far less talent and ability zoomed right by me. Eventually, it became clear that a motivated person who was willing to get in front of enough people to simply tell their story would always outsell this sales pro with the slick closes and the fancy techniques. Let me give you an example. There was an insurance company in Chicago that called in a consultant to analyze why their profits were declining. The company was averaging only 2.5 sales per agent per month, and they were at their wits' end. So the consultant comes in and immediately puts his finger on the problem. He tells them, your only problem is that you're not calling on enough people. Well, the solution was way too simple for the top execs of the company. After all, they'd paid the consultant big money, and they wanted him to discover a big problem. So the consultant said, I'll prove it to you. He took a group of their salespeople, a cross-section of Salesforce from the best to the worst, and told them, effective today, you're going to start selling policies door to door in neighborhoods where you don't know a soul. There will be no leads provided. There will be no qualifying prospects. And when the person opens the door, you must start the sales call with the following words. You don't want to buy any life insurance, do you? Their mission was simply to see how many people they could repeat that message to every day. That was it. Needless to say, the salespeople were a bit skeptical. I can imagine. So what happened? The approach failed, she said matter-of-factly. Well, of course, I replied knowingly. Yep. 59 out of 60 people they approached said, you're right, I don't want to buy any life insurance, so get lost. But 1 out of every 60 said, as a matter of fact, I do need insurance. Come on in and sign me up. 1 out of 60 isn't a very good closing ratio. You'd be right if it took a month to see 60 prospects. But with this consultant's approach, the average salesperson found that it took 8 hours to approach 60 people. And their "you don't want insurance" message. As a result, they immediately began averaging about 1 sale a day. Whoa! The company was saved, right? Yep. Approaching enough people with your offer, even the most negative message imaginable, can save whole companies and entire careers. You see, if you truly want to accelerate your sales performance, you have to fail faster. That reminds me of this telemarketing guru I heard about. I interjected. He recommends that phone solicitors ask customers in the first 10 seconds if they have interest in hearing about the product they're selling. If the customer says no, then they politely say thank you and move on, rather than going through their entire pitch. As a result, they make 10 times as many calls, but only invest their time making their complete sales pitch to prospects who have just qualified themselves. It's the same basic premise, Cheryl replied. You know, when you mine for gold, you don't really look for the gold, you remove the dirt. Selling and gold mining are very much alike. It's the people who remove the most dirt, who work their way through the greatest number of no's and ultimately discover the greatest number of golden yeses. All right, we'll get the rest later.